I have no idea how it works, but the biggest events in our lives happen by accident when you couldn't predict it. For example, thanks to a completely random event, I found out that once my beloved wife was cheating on me with some guy. It upset me, but I knew exactly what I needed to do. Nothing good ever happens when you're in a place you're not supposed to be. It wasn't my fault. I was stopped at a red light when a guy pulled up next to me. He gestured for me to roll down my window. "You've got a low tire," he said. I thanked him and pulled into the Walmart parking lot on the right. I got out to check and saw a screw head embedded in the tire tread with air slowly leaking out. Great. What now? I decided to go inside and buy a can of that slime stuff. When I came back, I removed the screw. Big mistake. The air started hissing out even faster. I screwed it back in and added some air at the gas station in the parking lot. I was only 15 miles from home and planned to check the tire frequently. If it got too low, I'd use the slime. About 5 miles from home, I noticed the tire getting pretty low in the driver's side mirror. I pulled into a convenience store, but they didn't have any air. Time to test the slime. I put it in some green goo, called slime for a reason, I guess. Came out, but the hissing stopped. I was about to get back in my car when I saw a pickup truck pull in. It was one of those huge ones with massive tires, so high you'd need a ladder to get in. Clearly, the guy had something to prove. I recognized the truck. The door opened, and a tall blonde guy stepped out, wearing cowboy boots and a huge belt buckle. I chuckled, but it died halfway out. The passenger door opened and a beautiful raven-haired woman hopped down. I immediately recognized her. It was Rachel, the woman I'd been married to for the past 18 years. What the hell? I was parked off to the side and they didn't even notice my car. It was the company car, one of those small boxy imports, not very conspicuous, I suppose. They were holding hands as they walked into the store and she was laughing up at his face. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. All I could do was stand there like an idiot. Then I remembered where I'd seen the guy before. He worked at the same company as Rachel. She was the office manager at a mental health clinic, and he was one of the caseworkers. I'd seen his truck at their building. The question was, what was Rachel doing with him? I couldn't recall his name at first. Then it hit me, Jerry Garner. The real question was, why wasn't Rachel at work? I was determined to find out. I got back in the car and waited. When they came out of the store, he helped her in, both holding cups of coffee. They sped off, and I followed at a safe distance. They drove to our house, and he parked in the garage. The door closed, blocking my view. I waited for 30 minutes, growing anxious about the tire. I kept checking it, but if it was deflating, I couldn't tell. After 2 hours, the garage door opened and they drove past me. I held a file folder up to shield my face, but they were too engrossed in each other to notice. She was sitting close to him, their attention fully on each other. Rachel didn't get off work until 5 and it was only 2:30. I had plenty of time. First, I needed to go in and see what I could find. I had to pick up Toby, my 15-year-old daughter, at 4, and I still didn't know what I was going to tell her. I had no idea what I would discover inside, but I hoped to get some answers. When I went inside, everything was silent. I could hear the drip from the faucet I'd meant to fix in Toby's bathroom. That was the only sound, aside from the whispering air from the air conditioner vents. I looked around, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I checked upstairs. The bed had been changed. There were fresh sheets. My heart sank like a stone. I leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor, feeling numb. There seemed to be only one logical explanation. I must have sat there for 30 minutes, my mind in a daze. I couldn't make sense of my thoughts and felt as if I'd been drugged. My stomach began to churn, so I got up and opened a Sprite. Feeling hot and sweaty, I went to the bathroom. I fumbled in the vanity for a washcloth, wet it in the sink, and washed my face with cold water. Afterward, I felt a bit better. Then I noticed something. The shower floor was wet. They had taken a shower before going back to work. I wandered back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in a daze, the bed that my wife and her lover had just vacated. I jumped up at that thought and stared at it in horror. This was the scene of the crime. I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew I had to divorce Rachel. That much was clear. But beyond that, I was clueless. I didn't know any lawyers and had no idea how to start the process. Plus, I had to pick up Toby from school. Toby! What was I going to tell her? I stumbled out to the car, feeling like I had been on a 10-day bender. My head was pounding and I looked awful. I was in no condition to drive, but I couldn't leave Toby waiting. Suddenly I realized she was the one stable thing in my life. My baby girl was going to be okay. I had to make sure of that. Whatever I did next, I had to keep her in mind. As I pulled up in the car line, I saw her standing by the school doors. She walked towards the car, looking so beautiful it made my heart ache. Toby had inherited her mother's dark, almost Mediterranean hair and skin. She had the most incredible eyes I'd ever seen, mostly brown, but with streaks of gold and green. The doctor called them hazel, but I'd never seen anything like them. She was tall like me, with long honey-brown legs and stunning beauty. She opened the back door and tossed in her backpack. When she got in, she slid over to kiss me, but then froze. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked. "Are you sick? Did something happen? Is Mom okay? What's going on, Dad?" Her voice was rising with a hint of fear creeping in. I had to say something. "I'm okay, kitten," I said. "No one is hurt or sick or anything like that. I need to talk to you, Toby. Let's go to the park and let me hold you and talk to you for a minute, okay? Please don't ask any more questions until we get there, all right?" "Okay, Dad, but you're kind of scaring me," she replied. "I know, kitten, but everything is going to be all right," I assured her, hoping it wasn't a lie. It only took us about 5 minutes to get to the park. I had pushed her on those swings countless times. Rachel and I had both sat on the benches watching her play on the equipment. Happier times. Was that all my life would be, just reminiscing about happier times? We walked to one of the benches and she held my hand, swinging our arms as we walked, just as she had since she was a tiny little thing, just able to walk. We sat down, and I struggled to find the words to begin. "Just tell me, Dad," she said. "I can handle it." "Well, I'm not sure I can," I replied. Then the story came tumbling out. I told her everything. Everything I'd seen, everything I was feeling, and tears streamed down my cheeks like a river. She held my hand through it all, and when the flood of words and emotions dried up, she snuggled up against me. "It doesn't sound good, Dad," she said. "We need to go home and ask Mom about it. I guess everything depends on what she tells us. I know it looks bad, but we don't know enough yet. We have to talk to her." I kissed the top of her head, my heart swelling with pride. My baby was so much braver than I was. She tugged on my hand until I stood up. "Want to drive?" I asked. Her eyes lit up. She had just gotten her learner's permit. A cloud briefly crossed her beautiful eyes as she considered, but it quickly passed. She drove us home carefully, and Rachel's car was already in the garage. This was it. Rachel met us at the door, giving each of us a hug and a kiss. You would never have guessed she was a cheating liar. Either she was an Oscar-worthy actress, or I had misunderstood everything. "Do you two want takeout tonight?" she asked. "My treat." "I think we need to talk to you for a minute, Mom," Toby said. "Okay. Is everything all right, baby?" "I don't know," Toby replied. "Let's find out." We went inside, and I sat on the sofa next to Toby, leaving Rachel to sit in that hideous chair she just had to have. "What's up?" she asked, without a hint of concern. "How did your day go?" I asked. She looked at me, puzzled. "Just the usual," she said. "One of the drug reps brought lunch from the onion bin." It was pretty busy, and I hardly had a minute to myself. Why do you ask? Did you stay at the office all day? Toby asked. Of course, she replied. Why all these questions? What's happening? So you weren't here at the house with Jerry Garner this afternoon? I inquired. Her face turned pale. Of course not, she responded. Are you accusing me of something, Oliver? I saw you, I stated. What? You didn't see anything? She stammered. What are you trying to do? He's lying, Toby. I was at the office all day. You can ask Angel. No, I don't think he's lying, Mom, Toby said. I think you're lying. I won't ask Angel because she'd lie for you. I'll call David Jones, your boss. He wouldn't lie for you. What's his number? He's left for the night, Rachel said. I'll have him call you tomorrow. What are you two up to? Are you trying to trick me or something? Do you think you can just come here and trip me up? What are you accusing me of? It seemed she believed the best defense was a good offense. I think you tripped yourself up, I told her. You lied, Rachel. All three of us know it. Why did you do that? I could see the wheels turning in her head. Okay, I was here, she admitted. This is why I didn't want to tell you. I knew you'd interrogate me and accuse me of something. Toby said, nobody has accused you of anything. Now I'm accusing you of something. You tried to make me believe Dad is a liar. You attempted to portray him as a liar to hide your own lie. What are you lying about, Mom? Are you having an affair with that guy? You barely know him, Rachel replied. Why do you call him a guy? I've met him twice, Toby replied. The way he stares at me makes me feel dirty. But that's not the point. Are you having an affair with him? Rachel's eyes darted between us, looking like a cornered animal for a moment. I didn't want it to come to this, she finally said. I wasn't prepared. What weren't you ready for? Toby inquired. I've just fallen in love with Jerry, she confessed, glancing towards me. I apologize, Oliver, it just happened. We've been working closely together, you know. He's like the missing piece of my soul. Our connection was undeniable, and I couldn't resist. We're in love. I was planning to tell you when we were prepared. Once we both finalize our divorces, we're getting married. I'm deeply sorry you had to find out like this. Toby, everything will be all right. You'll still have access to your father whenever you want. Jerry has a lovely place by the lake. He also has a daughter who likes you. We'll be very happy together. Are you out of your mind? Toby erupted. I refuse to live with that jerk. He'd probably creep into my room at night. I'll be staying with Dad, and I won't be seeing you. How could you? With that, she stormed off to her room, locking the door behind her. Rachel turned to me. She'll come around, she assured. Jerry is a good man, Oliver. I believe you'll come to like him. I'm sorry, but my happiness matters. Jerry makes me happy, and that's all that matters. I simply stared at her. Who was she now? It seemed as though she had been replaced or something. I wasn't going to engage in argument or discussion with someone so dangerously irrational. Fine, Rachel, I replied. When do you plan on leaving? Leaving? She exclaimed. I'm not leaving. I have nowhere to go. Jerry is married, and we can't do anything until we inform his wife. We all have to get divorces and figure out our next steps based on the settlement. No, you're leaving, I insisted. You have 3 days. She was incredulous. What are you talking about? You can't kick me out of my own home. If anything, you should be the one leaving. You're forgetting something, I reminded her. This is my house. I owned it before I met you. It was fully paid off, solely in my name before our marriage. The house isn't a marital asset, it's mine. My name is on the deed, not yours. So you're leaving my house. Where? She asked. Are you just going to put me out on the street? I really don't care where, I replied. Maybe you could find a room in the Speck of a Cheating Wife, or one of those hourly rental places, you know. Isn't that where you carry out your affairs? Tears welled up in her eyes. That's really hurtful, Oliver, she said. There's no need for name-calling. I didn't intend to fall in love with Jerry, it just happened. We connected, and I felt I had to be with him. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't mean to hurt you, I said. It's like tripping while running with a stick and accidentally poking your eye. Mom always warned me about that. I understand now. Well, it's all right then. It was unintentional. You don't need to be so sarcastic, she replied. Why can't you just acknowledge that we're in love, Oliver? Well, gosh, Rachel, I'm not sure, I responded. Maybe it's because this morning you said you loved me, and now you're saying you love him. It's a bit confusing. I do love you, Oliver, she insisted. I always will. I'm just in love with Jerry. Ah, that clears it up, I remarked. You've been telling me you were in love with me every day for the past 18 years, Rachel. I thought that's why we got married. We were in love. I guess I was mistaken. No, we were in love. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. You have 3 days, Rachel. If you're not gone in 3 days, I'll have the sheriff escort you out and toss your belongings in the driveway. Please, Oliver, she pleaded, fear evident in her voice. It doesn't have to be like this. We can still be friends. Jerry wants to be your friend too. We have Toby to consider. I told you I love you and I don't want to lose you as a friend. We've been through too much together for you to just throw it all away. I stared at her silently for a moment. All the sadness and loss I felt seemed to dissipate, replaced by a surge of intense anger. You've got to be kidding me, Rachel, I exclaimed. Friends? With you? With that jerk? Absolutely not. You should tell him that if he ever sees me, it'll be right before he runs off as fast as he can. And as for you, Rachel, you're the enemy now. I'll make sure your house burns down. You've got 3 days, and after that, I never want to see your deceitful self again. I'll consult a lawyer first thing in the morning, and we'll get this divorce over with as quickly as possible. I turned away and headed to the bedroom, ignoring her protests. She trailed after me, still going on about being friends, as I moved her belongings into the spare room. With more clothes than I could carry, I simply draped them over her and carried armfuls to the spare room closet. She followed, continuing her chatter, but I seized the opportunity to slip away and lock the bedroom door while she was occupied with hanging clothes. I heard her approach, attempt the doorknob, and then retreat. Toby reached out to me via text a few minutes later. You okay, Dad? Yeah, kitten, you? I replied. Not really, but I'll manage, she responded. All right, love you, I sent. Just let me know if you need anything. Can you take me to school tomorrow? She asked. I don't want to ride with her. Sure thing. I settled into bed, spending hours pondering my next steps. Somewhere around 3, I must have drifted off, only to be roused by my phone alarm. After a shower, I called my boss, explaining my situation and requesting a few days off for a divorce. He was understanding, offering all the appropriate sympathies. Afterwards, I brewed some coffee, had a couple of cups, and prepared breakfast for Toby and myself. She appeared right on schedule, still as lovely to me as ever, devouring her meal quickly. Rachel eventually joined us for coffee, attempting conversation, but we both brushed her off. It was time to take Toby to school, and Rachel inquired if she was ready. Toby glanced at her, then turned to me and asked, "Are you ready, Dad?" I jangled the keys as she grabbed her backpack. "Fine, you can act like toddlers if it makes you happy," Rachel muttered. She walked off to grab her purse, shooting us one last glare before leaving. I took Toby to school, and she gave me a kiss as she got out of the car. I stayed for a moment, watching her go inside, my mind drifting to my friend Dan. He had recently gone through a divorce, so I thought I'd give him a call and ask about his attorney. Dan didn't recommend his attorney. Instead, he suggested I use his ex-wife's attorney. He gave me the name, and I looked up the contact information. When I called, a woman answered and put me on hold after I explained my situation. She agreed to meet with me that afternoon, and I went through the usual motions. We had investments, and there wasn't much I could do about that. However, I could take steps to prevent her from running up credit card bills, so I called and lowered the limits on our cards to $500. It would cramp my style too, but I wasn't going to fund her little scheme. My initial meeting with Elizabeth Baxter didn't start on a positive note. She had certain assumptions that needed to be corrected before we could proceed. Her assumption was that I was leaving Rachel for someone new. "You'll need to rethink that," I informed her. "Rachel has been involved with a colleague. He's married, and they both intend to divorce their spouses and marry each other." "I apologize," she responded. "I can't represent someone who's making the kind of decision you've described. I wouldn't be able to face myself in the mirror." "I understand," I acknowledged. "We have a daughter. I want to minimize the impact on her. Do you think it's feasible for me to gain custody?" "It's possible," she said. "In theory, either parent is considered equally likely to gain custody. However, in practice, fathers rarely obtain custody, especially of daughters. How old is she, and is she likely to want to stay with you?" "I said she does, and she's 15, I replied. "That will heavily influence the court's decision," she explained. "In this state, children over 14 have the right to choose, and younger children's preferences are always taken into account. If she were much younger, your chances would be slim. Having primary residence and the fact that a 15-year-old wants to stay with you should significantly impact the custody arrangement. It shouldn't be a problem." "Just do your best," I said. I drove home pondering what to do next. I knew I had to act, but it had to be within the bounds of the law. Losing Toby was not an option I was willing to entertain. What options were available? I had to be cautious, ensuring my actions didn't backfire. This required careful consideration and planning. I suspected that his wife was just as unaware as I was, so my first move would be to inform her. Creating a list was essential. I definitely planned to inform her family. Rachel's parents adored me and Toby, so they were my priority. However, I wasn't sure about the approach. Making sure all our friends were in the loop was crucial, and I figured I could stir up enough attention on social media to keep things interesting for them. It was at the top of my agenda. Rachel had a family Facebook account. I was familiar with it, having used Messenger frequently and navigated it often. After some online research, I discovered that Jerry's wife had a similar setup. I grabbed some screenshots, posted on Rachel's page announcing our divorce, and her newfound soulmate in Jerry, accompanied by his picture. Then I changed the password and logged out. It felt satisfying. I wondered how long it would take for her friends and family to react on her phone and Facebook. I hoped Jerry's wife would get the message. While I felt guilty about the potential chaos heading her way, I believed she'd prefer knowing the truth rather than being kept in the dark like I had been. I phoned Mom. As expected, the conversation didn't go well initially, but beyond her initial disbelief, she assured me she'd informed Dad and reiterated their support for me. I made the decision to leave it to Rachel to inform her parents. We were close, and I didn't want to be the cause of any rift between them. Besides, I had no clue what I would even say to them. Saying something like, "Your daughter is unfaithful," didn't seem appropriate. They might blame me for delivering such news. But soon after, things spiraled out of control. Around 2 p.m., Rachel's number popped up on my phone. I answered, and she was furious. "You jerk!" Her first words brought me a sense of satisfaction. "You couldn't just leave it alone, could you? I know you blocked me on Facebook. Take that post down. Jerry's wife doesn't know yet. All my friends are calling, asking what happened. Even my parents know. Oliver, I'm warning you. Delete it." "No, you can't boss me around," I retorted. "What? Are you acting like a 5-year-old? Delete it, Oliver, I'm telling you." "Why should I?" I challenged. "You should be glad. This way everyone can know about you and your lover." "Are you ashamed for people to find out you cheated, Rachel. I'm not. She trailed off. It seemed she realized the absurdity of her argument. Oliver, please, take it down. This isn't how it was supposed to go. You forfeited any say in how it would go the moment you cheated, I reminded her. You've lost any right to my respect or even civility. I warned you, Rachel. You're my adversary now. Get used to it. I ended the call. Immediately my phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. It was time to pick up Toby. I informed her about the outcome of my discussion with Elizabeth Baxter. Although she was pleased that she would likely be joining me, she seemed generally discontent. What's wrong with her, Dad? She inquired. You know I care about her, but she's always been a bit erratic. I've never really seen her as a mature adult, unlike you. It's like having two kids, her and me. Have you ever noticed? Not exactly like that, I replied. Now that you mention it, she's always had a tendency to act on impulse, but it's nothing new. I never imagined she'd go to this extent. Well, we'll have to deal with it as best as we can, she remarked. Dad, I never want to be alone in the same house with that creep unless you're there. Whatever it takes, make sure of that, okay? I'll do my utmost, I assured her. We grabbed pizza on our way home, and as I was savoring my second slice, my phone buzzed. It was Bob, Rachel's father. I wasn't anticipating this call. I informed Toby who it was, and she instructed me to put it on speaker. He went straight to the point. Oliver, I'm not sure what's happening, but Rachel showed up last night asking to stay with us. Care to explain? Did you ask her? I replied. She said you kicked her out. Well, I did. But did she tell you why? No. She said she would explain when she's ready. Are you sure you don't want to wait for her explanation? I asked. Can't you just tell me? He asked. She's been having an affair with Jerry Garner, a co-worker. He's planning to divorce his wife. She was planning to divorce me, and they're together, I explained. What? That's crazy, Oliver. How do you know this? I caught them together yesterday, I said, and she confirmed it. Are you sure you didn't misunderstand? He asked. Toby interjected. Hi, Grandpa. I've been listening. Dad has you on speaker. There's no misunderstanding. I was there when she told him. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I love you. She sobbed, and he heard it. When he spoke again, his voice was cracking. Don't cry, love bug. Please, just be strong, okay? I love you too, and so does Grandma. I'll try and talk some sense into your mom. Oliver, you still there? Yes, I'm sorry, Bob. Don't worry about Toby. You're her grandparents, and nothing will change that. I know you love Rachel, and you'll do what you have to do. I respect you more than words can express. I hope you won't hate me when this is over. That's never going to happen, he said. I'll find out what's going on. Call me if you need anything. It went better than I feared. Shit happens. You do the best you can. Detailing the divorce proceedings seems unnecessary given that many are familiar with such experiences. It was a prolonged and painful process that offered no reprieve. Rachel held unrealistic expectations, believing she would gain custody of Toby, but that didn't materialize. Ms. Baxter proved competent, and I was granted full custody, supported by Toby's preference to live with me. Following a private meeting where Toby expressed their wishes, the judge granted Rachel visitation rights, albeit with restrictions preventing alone time with Toby and Jerry Garner. However, this became inconsequential. While his wife divorced him, it appeared that the notion of being soulmates was exaggerated, particularly on his part. Just 2 weeks after discovering their affair, he pursued another relationship, leaving behind their grand plans like dissipating fog. The divorce proceedings lasted 7 months. Rachel had a change of heart, surprising me during our second court appearance by requesting counseling, which the judge ordered despite our objections. We were scheduled for 8 to 10 sessions, but it seemed futile. We have an eccentric old hippie guy leading our sessions. In our first meeting, we were prompted to outline our objectives. Rachel's was verbose and tangled, conveying a sense that she believed I should recognize her happiness as the central focus of the universe, and that any actions of hers were geared solely towards that end. Mine was much more straightforward. "What are your goals for these sessions, Mr. Berriman?" he inquired. "My goal is to simply get through them," I replied. Our guide looked disapproving. "Mr. Berriman, are you truly uninterested in addressing the issues that led to your marriage's current state?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Rodman, but it wasn't my issues that led us here, and I genuinely have no desire to work on them. I'm content with my flaws and have no intention of changing them." Rachel was as appalled as Mr. Guru and didn't hold back. "Oliver, how do you expect us to reconcile if you refuse to even talk about this?" "I don't," I stated. "Let me be clear to both of you. I couldn't care less about going back to where we were or working on issues. I'm only here because of a court order. I'll comply to meet that order, then we'll return to court and proceed with the divorce. That's my plan." Mr. Pathguide informed me that if I refused to cooperate and he reported it to the judge, I could be cited for contempt, I said. "I wasn't aware of that," I continued. "Are you suggesting that if you go back to the judge and misrepresent the situation? These sessions are being recorded. I'm confident my attorney would be eager to subpoena the recordings and reveal your falsehood. I'm here, following your instructions. You asked about my goals and I provided them. Clearly, I'm cooperating." He became flustered. "I believe the judge anticipated you attempting to resolve the issues between you," he stated. "I'm not accountable for the judge's expectations," I replied. "I'm only responsible for my own." He attempted to make things challenging. He signed me homework that involved spending significant time with Rachel, who tirelessly tried to wear me down. "Oliver, what would it take for you to drop the divorce and reconcile?" she asked. "An act of God," I replied. She waited for further explanation, but I remained silent. "What do you mean by an act of God?" she eventually inquired. "Well, unless you have the power to turn back time and undo Jerry's betrayal, that's what it would take," I said. "Otherwise, only God, as far as I know, possesses such power." "Have you suddenly developed abilities you haven't disclosed, Rachel? Besides the ability to captivate other men with your charm, that is." We trudged onward, each tedious step feeling like a repetition of the last, until finally, it was all over. Returning to court, the judge inquired about our progress. "Your Honor, it's abundantly clear that my client has no intention of remaining married," declared Elizabeth Baxter. "We seek a swift resolution to this divorce proceedings. My client and his daughter have endured enough." The judge evidently concurred, for 10 days later the decree arrived. Toby continued to see her mother regularly, drawn by her affection for her grandparents. Rachel made sporadic attempts to engage Toby in activities, but it was never quite the same. Toby preferred the company of her friends, particularly Sabrina, a petite blonde who seemed practically inseparable from us. She was as endearing as a newborn kitten and as delightful as honey. I welcomed her presence, and gradually they began to involve me in their plans. Among their shared interests was water skiing. With a boat at our disposal, our Saturdays during summer vacation often found us at nearby lakes. One Monday, they proposed a weekend trip to the lake in our RV, extending until Sunday evening. Since my social calendar wasn't exactly bustling, I readily agreed. Toby and Sabrina spent the week organizing, and on Thursday we packed everything they desired. On Friday afternoon, a shiny new red Jeep Cherokee pulled into our driveway and Sabrina hopped out. A nearly identical woman emerged from the driver's side, and Toby rushed over to embrace her in a hearty hug. Together, they ushered the unfamiliar and visibly nervous figure towards me. "Dad," Toby began, "this is Julie. She's Sab's mom, and I don't think you've met her yet." Julie extended her hand. "Hello, Oliver. The girls have told me so much about you. Thank you for inviting me along this weekend. Honestly, I've been a bit envious that they spend so much time with you instead of me." She flashed me a mischievous smile, and I instantly understood why her daughter was so charming. Glancing at Toby, who shot me a fierce glare, I knew when to yield. My knees trembled, especially when I met Sabrina's raised eyebrow. "It's going to be a fantastic time," I reassured Julie, finding my voice again. "We always have a blast." Julie caught on quickly. She glanced between me and the girls, then back at me. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed. "You had no idea, did you? Girls." Before she could utter another word, she was enveloped in a flurry of hugs, kisses, and reassurances. "Don't worry, Mom, we're going to have a great time," Sabrina chimed in. "It's all right, Julie. Dad will adore you just as much as I do. He's wonderful," Toby added. "Just look at how he's rolling with this." Julie extricated herself from the affectionate onslaught and surveyed them both. "You two, go sit on the porch. I need to have a word with Oliver," she instructed. They hesitated, and she added firmly, "Now." They took her seriously and hurried away. "I'm so sorry, Oliver. I had no idea," she apologized. "I'm going to take Sabs and leave. She's going to be grounded for a month. God, this is embarrassing." She appeared so small and embarrassed that I approached and embraced her. At first she tensed up, but then relaxed. "Yes, it is embarrassing," I acknowledged. "They are quite mischievous, but you and I both know they mean no harm. Let me guess, you're not married?" She looked up at me and chuckled. She was adorable. "No, I'm not. Do you think that's what this is about?" "I'm almost certain," I replied. "Here's the deal. You're packed, you've cleared your weekend. The weather will be beautiful at the lake. I'm not a bad guy, as you know from being around Toby. Let's play along. It'll be fun. We might even prank them a little. What do you say?" She stepped back, glanced at the girls' eager faces, and agreed. "Yeah, let's go." I gave them the thumbs up, and they jumped to their feet, rushing over to join us. I heard Toby exclaim enthusiastically, "Yeet!" I intervened, wrapping an arm around each of them. "Girls, that wasn't very kind, Arma. Dios santos." Sabs glanced up at me, emitting a laugh in her best Skeletor impression. "I am not nice," she retorted. That sent us all into fits of laughter, making it hard for me to continue. They were just too endearing and innocent. "We understand what you were trying to do," I explained. "But you need to stop. You can't just meddle in other people's lives." "But I love Jules, and I didn't know how else to get you to meet her," Toby argued. "You could have just told me," I replied. She looked a bit dejected. "It's okay, kitten. Just don't do it again," I reassured her. She perked up immediately. Sabs tugged on my arm. "Let's go. I can't wait. This is going to be amazing, Oliver. You'll see." Julie chuckled. "I think that's supposed to be the epitome of cool, Oliver, but she's right. We're wasting daylight." We took 2 bags from her Jeep and got inside. We had the boat hitched, and after stopping for propane, we hit the road. It took about half an hour to reach the lake, with Julie sitting up front beside me. The girls played some terrible music through their Bluetooth connections, and we started getting to know each other. Turns out, Julie owned her own insurance company and also did financial planning. I observed her as we chatted and couldn't help but think she was adorable. I imagined Sabs would resemble her at Julie's age. Despite seeming much younger, she was only 3 years my junior. Standing at around 5 feet tall, she had long, light blonde hair, a nice tan, huge brown eyes, high cheekbones, and a perfectly shaped heart face with a widow's peak on a broad forehead. She wore jeans and a button-up top, appearing slender and graceful. I didn't want to ogle her, so I refrained from admiring her until we reached the lake. We secured a slip for the boat and then parked the RV. They asked me to wait outside while they changed, so I hooked up the water in the meantime. When they emerged, ready in their new attire, I went in, changed into swim trunks and a t-shirt, and we were good to go. We packed a cooler full of drinks and set off. Exiting the no-wake zone, I accelerated. After covering a few miles on the lake, they were eager to start skiing. The girls shed their long t-shirts, revealing their typical awkward charm. Julie, however, was exceptional. There was nothing clumsy about her. I had described her as slender, but she was petite yet undeniably feminine. When she turned to watch the girls ski, I was captivated. Her bikini wasn't cutting edge, but it struggled to contain a remarkable rear end. Small, round, firm. It protruded like a shelf. As she caught me staring, she simply smiled and winked. Despite her small breasts, they seemed just right on her, complementing her perfectly proportioned figure. "Finished?" she inquired, her smile disarming. Her teeth were flawless. I chuckled. "For now." "You know how you look, Julie. I'm only human." She joined me, positioning herself to chat while keeping an eye on the girls. We spent 3 hours skiing, during which Julie proved herself quite skilled. She even took the helm of the boat when it was my turn, and she handled it with expertise. Though I couldn't match her or the girls in skill, physics was simply not on my side. I managed to hold my own. We returned to the park and they wrapped up the food. Although the RV had a fully functional kitchen, the girls preferred cooking outdoors. We brought out the camping stove and I started a fire in the grill at the site. While I grilled bratwursts, they diced and fried potatoes and onions and opened cans of pork and beans. While we had prepared and packed some meals at home, this was our first night and camp cooking always tastes great. We sat at the picnic table provided by the site and soon it felt like we had known each other for ages. Julie became Jules, as the girls called her, and she enjoyed it. In turn, she referred to me as Ollie. The girls brought up multiple times that Jules wasn't married, and I eventually inquired why. "I mean, seriously, you're stunning, funny, intelligent, you have your own business. Why hasn't some guy swept you off your feet?" She paused for a moment. "Well, the primary reason is Sabrina," she finally replied. "I was young and naive, Ollie. I was a senior in college, and I thought I had found the love of my life. I discovered I was pregnant a week before graduation. I wasn't too upset. We had discussed getting married right after we graduated. I suppose that plan fell through, considering you're talking about it in the past tense," I remarked. "No, it did. 3 days after I informed Brad, I learned he'd been unfaithful for a month. I broke things off with him and never looked back. When Sabs was born, I didn't have time for a social life for a while, and then I got engrossed in building my business. By the time I could pause and even consider dating, I realized I had this precious gift from God in my life, and I couldn't make any decisions without taking her into account." "I comprehend," I responded. "I share the same sentiment about Toby. As long as she's with me, she's my top priority. I can't stress enough how vital she is to me. She's been my anchor for the past 18 months, keeping me grounded." She gently placed her small hand on my arm. "I understand," she said softly. "She confides in Sabs and me about everything. I'm deeply sorry, Ollie." "Yeah, life can be tough." We both sighed in agreement. Glancing up, we noticed 2 pairs of affectionate eyes, watching us approvingly. They were engaged in a quiet conversation, seated in folding chairs beneath the shade of the awning. "I adore your daughter," I confessed to her. "It feels like she's almost a part of me, given how much time she spends with us." "She adores you too," she replied. "She mentioned the other day that you're like the father figure she never had." As I looked at her, her large brown eyes welled up with tears, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. I wiped it away with the back of my finger. "She's an amazing girl," I said. "I believe her mother must be an extraordinary woman to have raised someone like her. She's also incredibly brave, raising her alone." She smiled, her eyes brimming with emotion, got up, kissed my cheek, and went to join the others. We had an incredible weekend, and as she was leaving, I walked up to her car and tapped on the window. "Jules, would you consider going out with me next Friday?" I inquired. Sabs exclaimed with joy, and Jules flashed a smile. "What time?" "6," I suggested. "We'll grab dinner and do something afterwards. Sound good? Oh, can Toby stay with Sabs while we're out?" "Sounds perfect, and of course," she replied, kissing my cheek before driving off with Sabs. Toby was waiting for me in the entryway. "Well?" she asked eagerly. "Did you ask her out? Did you kiss her?" I hugged her and playfully swatted her bottom. "Yes, I did, and it's none of your business," she squealed, echoing Sabs's earlier excitement. "I knew it. She's perfect for you, Dad. I love her so much, and Sabs is like my sister." I shrugged. "Whatever will be, Toby. You can't force these things. Stop trying to play matchmaker." She nuzzled into my chest. "I know, Dad. But if I didn't intervene, you would have just kept on loving me forever. Not that I mind being the only woman in your life," I chuckled. "Well, you'll always have a special place in my heart that no one else can fill. You're my baby, and that's never going to change." She purred contentedly for a moment, before going off to tend to her own affairs. Our initial outing went smoothly. I took her to play racquetball, even though she was new to the sport. However, having some experience with tennis, she quickly adapted to the similar stroke mechanics. Once she familiarized herself with the rules and the technique of hitting off the walls, she performed well, benefiting from her natural athleticism. She was incredibly fast and agile, utilizing her small stature to her advantage by swiftly changing directions. After we finished playing, we relaxed at a table outside the courts, sipping drinks and resting. She suggested taking a Snapchat photo with our rackets and goggles, which we promptly sent to our friends. It was a memorable moment. Later, we both showered, and I treated her to a delicious Italian meal, indulging ourselves to the fullest. We were wrapping up our wine, Jules seated next to me in the booth. We both leaned back, engaging in quiet conversation and unwinding. It felt instinctual to drape my arm around her, so I did. She shifted closer to me, smiling up affectionately. I couldn't help but think how endearing she was, realizing that her charm was timeless, unaffected by age. As we pulled up at her house, she leaned towards me, her gaze expectant. I sensed her desire for a kiss, so I obliged. In truth, I yearned to kiss her even more than she did. It was a lingering, delightful kiss. Her lips were plush and tender, carrying the faint taste of wine and cherry chapstick. As we parted, I noticed movement behind the curtains. "Looks like we have an audience," I remarked. She giggled, reminiscent of her daughter, or perhaps her daughter resembled her. "I'm not surprised. They're trying to set us up, you know?" "Does it bother you?" I inquired. She blushed. "No, I admire everything I've learned about you, Ollie." "Likewise," I replied. "We should probably head inside before they decide to pull the curtains down." For 4 months straight, we went out every Friday, growing closer each time. I felt the urge to progress our relationship, though I didn't want to rush things. Some of our outings ended with heated moments. Yet, I realized I cherished her friendship almost as much as our romantic connection. We constantly communicated through calls, snaps, and texts, sharing snippets of our lives multiple times a day. Whenever I stumbled upon something amusing, I felt compelled to share it with her, knowing she'd appreciate it. Our bond deepened, and we became intimately acquainted with each other's lives. Our Tuesday dinners became a regular occurrence, where we'd gather together, play games, and enjoy each other's company. I found myself enamored not only with her, but also with her mother, Sabs. They shared striking similarities, making it easy to understand one when you knew the other. Despite subtle and major differences, their charm shone through, accentuating their shared traits. Life was going well, with only one downside: Rachel's continued presence. Since she was still part of Toby's life, she unavoidably became part of mine. I wanted no involvement with her, and seeing her annoyed me. Every time she came to pick up Toby or I dropped him off at her grandparents', she would attempt to talk to me. She was still residing with them after losing her job, along with Jerry at the clinic. Now she was working at another private clinic across town. Whenever she annoyed me too much, I would inquire if she had heard from him, which usually discouraged her. "How long will it take for you to forgive me?" she once asked. "Forgive you?" "For what?" I responded. "As far as I can tell, you don't believe you've done anything wrong. Not once have I heard, 'I'm sorry, Oliver.' I was wrong. I apologize for trying to make Toby think you were a liar, for attempting to take her away from you, for trying to manipulate you during the divorce. And worst of all, I've never heard 'I'm sorry' for cheating and being unfaithful behind your back." I didn't hear it then either. She refused to accept any responsibility for her actions. I wasn't exactly sure what forgiving her would involve. I had made peace with the situation. I didn't forget, but I wasn't going to waste time holding on to bitterness. People have the freedom to make mistakes. They can choose to leave you, end relationships, and you have to accept it and move forward. People make regrettable decisions all the time. Initially, I wanted to retaliate against both cheaters, but I soon moved past that desire. Their punishment was simply being themselves. They had to live with their own actions. I was determined to focus on my own life and leave the lying and cheating behind me. Rachel was unhappy, and I harbored no ill will toward Jerry, but I wasn't going to be the one to wish them misfortune. I believed in leaving it to a higher power to mete out any punishment. I had removed myself from that situation. Rachel became even more discontent when she found out I was seeing Jules. I had taken Toby to stay with her grandparents for the night, and as she approached the car, she halted me. "I've heard you're seeing one of Toby's friend's mothers," she stated. I simply glanced at her. "Is it true?" she pressed. "That's personal," I replied. "No, it's not," she retorted sharply. "I'm your ex-wife. I deserve to know." "You have no rights here," I retorted. "You're not my wife anymore. Remember, you found your soulmate, and it wasn't me. Then came the divorce. What's mine is no longer yours, and vice versa. Stay out of my business, Rachel. Don't meddle again." I was furious as I drove off. She just wouldn't let it go. I informed Toby about the encounter. She was equally angered. That marked the end of me dropping Toby off at her grandparents', or Rachel picking her up from our place. Bob or Cindy, Toby's grandparents, began picking her up from our house instead. That relieved a major source of stress in my life. On the 7-month anniversary of our trip to the lake, I took Jules out. We dined at a nice restaurant and later went to a club. She didn't indulge much, just occasionally sipping on a beer or one drink. However, that night she had two, which caught my attention when she ordered the second. She chuckled. "I'm feeling a bit wild and crazy tonight, huh?" "You're perfect, just as always," I replied. "Do you really think so, Ollie?" She tilted her head sideways, a characteristic gesture of hers. "Because I think you're pretty perfect, too. If I'm so perfect, why haven't you invited me to spend the night?" I must have looked surprised because she laughed. "Have you not even considered it?" I gathered my thoughts. Yeah, Jules. I've hardly thought of anything else since that first day on the boat when I saw you in that bikini. When we started dating, I realized you were something different, something special, and I didn't want to pressure you or scare you off." "You won't scare me off," she assured. "I told the girls not to wait up." "Really? Well, what are we doing here?" I asked. "Oh my God, Jules, let's get out of this place. Do you want to spend the night with me?" Blushing, she took my hand as I helped her up. "More than anything else in the world right now." She leaned into me as we left, her head resting on my shoulder, holding onto my arm all the way home. I escorted her to the door when we reached the garage, and she stayed close as we walked to the bedroom. Turning her around at the foot of the bed, I kissed her. It was one of the most amazing kisses I'd ever experienced, seemingly endless. When we paused to catch our breath, she looked up at me, and I was lost in the warm brown depths of her eyes. She wrapped her arms around my neck and gazed into my eyes. "Make love to me, Oliver," she said. "I'm a little afraid." "Don't be," I reassured her. "I love you, Julie Barnes. You know that, right?" "I thought you did," she murmured. "I needed to hear it. I love you too, Oliver." I pulled her to me, wrapping my arms around her, and unzipped her petite blue dress with a slow and deliberate movement. I turned her around and sat her down on the bed, holding her at arm's length so I could admire her. My intuition did not let me down. She was impeccably beautiful. Holding her in my arms, I carried her to the bed, her arms wrapped around my neck before gently lowering her onto the bed. It was a very pleasant experience. We plunged into each other's arms and made love twice more during the night, once on my initiative, the other on hers. The next morning, I woke up lying on my back, and she was lying on top of me like an angel, her hair cascading over us, and her cheek pressed against my shoulder. I just watched her sleep, absently playing with her hair, until she stirred and, muttering something contentedly, snuggled even closer to me. "I feel like I belong here, Ollie," she said. "I know," I replied. "Would you want to wake up here every morning?" She opened her eyes and gazed at me. "You mean, like live together?" "Not exactly, darling." "Well, yes, but what I really mean is, will you marry me? Julie Barnes." She lifted her small left hand between us and wiggled her fingers. "Uh-oh," she said. "Looks like something's missing." "Hold that thought," I said, starting to get out of bed. "I'll hold on to the thought," she said. But I can't hold something else. I really need to pee." I chuckled and playfully swatted her rear, eliciting a squeal. "Go on, then meet me back here." She darted off, a little naked sprite, while I made my way to my office, pausing to use the restroom myself. Retrieving what I had come for from my safe, I returned to find her curled up under the covers. I stepped in and held her left hand again. Gazing into her eyes, I found nothing but affection. "Julie, will you marry me?" I slid the ring onto her finger. It was too large, needing resizing, but it sufficed for now. She examined it closely. "It's stunning," she remarked. "It seems antique. Where did you find it? When did you get it?" "Remember when I mentioned attending an auction?" I replied. "It was about a month ago." "Yes, I recall. They were auctioning off an estate, right?" "Exactly. What I didn't mention was spotting this ring in the catalog, intending to purchase it and propose to you. It dates back to England, around 1810, made for the Duchess of Avon. It carries quite a history. Do you approve?" "I adore it," she exclaimed. "It's the loveliest ring I've ever seen." "Will you give me an answer?" I inquired. "What?" "Oh, yes, Oliver. Yes, I'll marry you. Oh my God, yes." We laughed together, embracing tightly. "We should inform the girls," she suggested.